productive.
Thank you. We'll move on to a primary from Grant McCullum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've mentioned in your introductory remarks about the Holidays Act reform, and we've raised it before with you. And would you care to elaborate on how that's progressing and why it's so important for the sector and for all employees and employers?
So the Holidays Act is one of my main priorities because I've heard from so many people that non-compliance is really high. And it's very hard to get it right. I mean, even MB, who's sitting with us, has had non-compliance in the past. And so if our government department's struggling to understand the laws, then our small businesses, even our large businesses too, will be finding that really difficult. But on top of that, if you think of a worker who doesn't have the resources of an HR department or a payroll system, it's got to be even harder for them to know whether or not they're getting paid correctly. And I think that's wrong. So I would like to simplify the system so any business, any government agency, and any worker can understand what they're supposed to be entitled to and be paid every week or fortnight. Now, where we ended up was last year I went out for a consultation on a bill that had been developed by Labor or by the Labor government. The feedback that I received was, don't go ahead with this one because it could be even more technical and difficult to get right than the law that we currently got. So I decided to start again. And in starting again, we have now spent about 6 months working behind the scenes with my officials, and I really thank them for their work because it's very technical work, on a simplified model that at the heart has an accrual system. So if you look at the status quo, people are entitled to 4 weeks of annual leave after 12 months. In practice, we know that that hasn't been happening. People have been trying to use an accrual model in practice anyway. So we're saying from day dot, as soon as you start, you accrue leave for every hour that you work from the start of your employment agreement. By and large, the feedback I've had is that would be the most simple model, and they would like us to continue with this. We have done now, I'd say 98% of that technical work, and I still aim to have a bill to introduce by the end of this year. However, there's not much more I can give an update on at this stage. Other than that, we've been working behind the scenes with small and large business and payroll to ensure that's right. And at the heart of that is the implementation by payroll becomes really important. And when I first came into this role, the payroll practitioners said that they had not been consulted during the drafting of that previous bill, which is why it was so technical. It wasn't going to be easy to implement. It needs to work for payroll too.
Thank you.
Parmjit Palmer.
Thank you, Minister. Further to that, you also are working on how leave entitlement is calculated for part-time workers. So can you please elaborate on that? Where did that idea came from and how is it going to be fair for the employers and employees?
Yes, thanks for the question. So one area that our government is progressing with is the idea of pro rata sick leave, which means to say that a full-time employee is entitled to a full entitlement for sick leave. That's 10 days or an equivalent under our system, whereas a part-time worker would be entitled to a proportion of that. In part, this is supported by business because business are the ones having to stomach the cost. They're the ones having to pay for it. And if you think of a case of, a small retail shop, for example, might have a range of part-time workers. It's a lot of liability to have on their books to have multiple part-time employees with the sick leave at the same proportion as full-time employees. So we're looking at making it more proportional and much fairer for the system.
Thank you. Sat from Jane Taniti.
I'd like to make a bit of a clarification there on the sick leave.
Yeah, let's go.
And the thing is, if you're working 5 days a week at 4-hour days instead of 8-hour days, so you're working part-time, maybe because you're a parent and you've got kids in school.
Yep.
If you took a day's sick leave, you would only get 4 hours pay, not 8 hours pay. You'll get the pay of what your rostered shift is. Now,
sorry, please continue.
Yeah, the part I can see where Brooke is possibly coming from is, say, if you have that employee who works 1 day a week part-time, say, as your teenage person who works Sundays, getting 10 days sick leave out of 52 days a year. I see where she's coming from. I think she's got this one wrong.
She does.
But I see why she's saying that. But blanking it across the whole sector is possibly not right. Because most part-time workers are workers who are possibly not working 40 hours a week, but are probably still working 30, going out 5 days a week.
Yep.
That's the thing there.
this is the point I wanted to highlight, is that it's dangerous to do this because, you know, I mean, I'm just thinking about COVID and lockdowns and pandemics and things like that, right? If you've got someone who is sick and you're trying to control a virus or something, or you're trying to control the rate of people who are getting sick in your workplace, if you're not giving that person the sick leave, right, full payment,
Yeah.
they will be incentivized to go to work because they don't have enough money to stay home, right?
Yeah.
And so what could end up happening, like even with the flu or like a cold, like let's take something minor. Let's not take something as extreme as a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Let's take something a bit more mild, bit more milder, right? If that goes around, that part-time worker has potentially impacted the productivity of all the other workers in the business. So you're better off giving that person what they're currently entitled to under our current legislation, rather than play the stupid game about partial pay and all this stuff. And it's like, no, it's better to keep that person home, right? And, you know, be able to allow them to do the things that they normally do if they're at home, and to have them come into work and make everyone sick.
And also, you do have some companies out there, and I do know this happened at BP in some stores, not the stores I work for. I never happened at Levin or Johnsonville. I do know Promo did it, and it was because of the hours they had. They used to do 10-hour days, 4 days a week. Now, in BP, we got overtime once we worked more than 40 hours and once more than worked 8 hours, but certain stores had a different way of rostering, but it was to deal with because it was cheaper to do it this way than it was cheaper to have people work 4 10-hour days a week overall than it was to have 5 8-hour days and a bunch of part-timers. It was the way it was in the BP system. Going by Brooke's system, does someone who works 10-hour days 4 days a week, do they suddenly get a reduction in sick leave because they are still working 40 hours a week, which is classed as full-time? They're just doing it spread across 4 days instead of 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing that it can go in there. And also, if, say, someone is sick when they're working 10-hour days, they may still require a substantial period to take off. You know, and there's also some businesses where they'll do 4 on 4 off. So that muddies the rule on there. Police are, for example, one that one of the shift structures is 4 days on, 4 days off, and you rotate into a different shift pattern in that 4 days off.
But it's dumb shit. It's shit like this. This is the reason why people are moving to Australia, because they've got better laws around this stuff. But I just want to bring up another point because I don't want to overlook this, and this is the Holiday Act reform. You know, Grant McCallum's saying, "Oh, the Holiday Act." Well, okay, yeah. I just want to quote from the regulatory impact statement. I know you go. I know you sigh when I say that, because you know I'm going to start rambling. But yeah. So to quote them, there has not been there has not been wide consultation on the task force's recommendations. The lack of comprehensive consultation constrained in NBIE's ability to fully understand the impacts and costs of the task force's recommendations. So, according to the regulatory impact statement, yes, there is a need to simplify, address gaps, and reduce implementation requirements for payroll and businesses. I mean, this was also reflected in the 2020 RAS in their regulatory standard in their regulatory impact statement. Ooh, I'm trying to get through this as fast as possible. So yeah, I recommend people read this. Yeah. It's a boring read, but it's an important read.
Partly also what is adding to the confusion of this is the fact that a lot of the annual leaves, the way that it's been accounted for in accounting makes the Holidays Act weird once you put the two together. Because the accounting part of it is you account for, in a financial sense, the accrued part owing at the point the wages are paid. So this is a rule of thumb. And when I first started my business, the magic figure was 16%. It's now 20%. And the reason why that magic figure has gone up is because of 10 days sick leave instead of 5. So that is a cost that's worked out there. So it says currently under the Holidays Act, you get if you get 4 weeks annual leave a year, or but if you leave the job before 12 months, you get 8% holiday pay. But the thing is, in the accounting softwares and all that sort of thing, it accounts for, at the time the wage is earned, the 8% holiday pay and puts it as an accrued amount owing to the employee for accounting purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that confuses things with the accounting softwares, because if you have fluctuating hours, that really rambles it up, because you get put in a situation of 4 weeks leave or 8%, or what the 8% of your earnings were over the last year spread over 4 weeks, and it's the higher of the two. And when you do have fluctuating hours, it does make a problem in the system. But the accounting aspect of it occurs on a pay cycle basis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that also comes out there, is that a lot of accounting practices are that you set aside the liability amount per pay cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've got this weird system on my books at the moment, is where I owe myself on paper a ridiculous amount of leave. But whenever I've tried to take leave out of the system, it is paying me in zero 3 times my weekly pay packet.
Jeez.
Because of the way, so on my one, I've not taken any leave officially in my business, because the accounting dollar part is not right. Now, I could take it, okay, and probably not pay out the full amount, just leave it as a money owing. But the problem is I have to pay the tax part.
Yep.
That's the part I actually have to pay, is the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And that plays around with tax things there, especially if you get things like supplementary supports and that sort of thing there. So yes, I've not taken annual leave in my business on paper, because it pays me 3 times the amount, and I don't have the cash flow to personally pay me out that, because of the way the accounting part has worked.
Yep, and it's not just the thing with employers, but also impacts employees as well.
Because when they go on annual leave, their pay ain't necessarily in line with what their normal weekly wage is.
Correct.
Yeah, and I remember when the BP payroll system went out, we got caught up with that, and ironically, it was when the NovaPay debacle was happening.
Yep. So again, you're basically reinstating what the regulatory impact statement has said, like that there is a need to simplify the system. I don't think Brooke is the right person to do it.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what she ends up putting out as her bill.